What is it that keeps people talking without ceasing, that keeps them from truly listening?
Come to peace with our brokenness.
How does our history, our constellation of people that surround us, create conundrums?
It's within the depths of our darkness that we find the gold.
Our lineage.
It is in the wound that we find the light.
Our parents.
We have wounded parents raising children.
I believe the only way to get where we need to go is to embrace the gift of life.
Sometimes the gift of life is all that we get.
By bowing to our fate.
Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is Simran. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, Simran.
As human beings, our heart is found through vulnerability. It is only when we surrender all of the defenses that we've placed around the heart can we walk the path that leads us into vulnerability and the deeper levels of intimacy that follow. In order for intimacy to be present, there must be vulnerability. And in order for love to thrive, we must surrender to it. These are words from Shavasti, also known as John L. Payne. And he's been on 1111 Talk Radio before. We did a really beautiful 3-part series called The Awakened Heart, based on his audiobook and work. And I invite you to go back and explore that after you've listened to this episode. Shavasti is known worldwide as a leading figure in the world of family constellations, offering workshops and trainings through various organizations in multiple countries. His work today is inclusive of family constellation work and represents a synthesis of almost 30 years working with individuals and groups, over 8,000 private family constellation, shamanic, and energy healing sessions, plus more than 500 workshops worldwide and 5 published books. Sit back, take a deep breath, relax, and let's get into a conversation that weaves and winds between humanity, reality, illusion, mysticism, and divinity. Welcome, Shavasti, back to 1111 Talk Radio. I am so honored and thrilled that you've come back.
Thank you, Simran. When anyone who has a podcast or radio station or video channel extends the hand of generosity and invitation to take up their space and time with whatever it is that I have to say in the moment, I find it a generosity that touches me.
Well, I've always felt that you have such a rich voice, a tenderness, and a fierce truth that is so needed at this time in the world, with many things going on that are attempting to break our hearts open. And we either will calcify and continue to harden our hearts, or we will allow for that shattering that needs to happen in order to touch the vulnerability. I read a passage from one of the beautiful entries in your blog. You also do some wonderful videos online, but I want to touch on vulnerability and that line where you say, we must surrender all the defenses that we've placed around the heart.
Absolutely. I think one of the key movements is to come to peace with our brokenness. Each of us walks this earth just a little broken. Some of us more broken than others. But there's this thrust, particularly we see it within healing and therapeutic and prayerful circles, that there's this idea of reaching some kind of spiritual perfection. Whereas for me, that there is nothing more perfect than coming to peace with who we are in this moment, even with our brokenness. And so that's another layer of vulnerability that I really, really encourage, because when I come to peace with my brokenness, I don't have to appear to be something that I'm not with you or with anybody else, which is a layer of defense. And so that allows me to be more natural, to be more caring towards you and more caring towards myself in that bare honesty as to who I am as a human being.
I really understand what you're talking about. And since we have last connected, I met an experience that really allowed me to make the conscious choice to sink into the darkness, to immerse
Mm.
in the grief, to be swallowed
Mm.
whole, to allow that to obliterate any understanding of what I thought the world was or who I was, and
Mm.
say, let me drop the defenses that I have. And people try so hard to run from themselves, to run
Mhm.
from the darkness and the pain, and feeling that it is only towards the light that they have to go. And what I discovered was that the truest illumination for me was actually found in the darkness.
Absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's within the depths of our darkness that we find the gold. It is in the wound that we find the light. Back in the early 90s, I was very much a light chaser. I had a bit of a uncomfortable love mask, and I don't mind talking about these things now. It's a little bit sad and it's also laughable and amusing at the same time. I took on all these ideas of what it was to be spiritual, what it was to be evolved, and so I mimicked, pretended to be those things, but underneath was a deep and enduring pain from unresolved issues from my childhood, the violence that I had suffered from issues of abandonment, etc. And I thought if only I could just be good enough, then all of that would instantly go away. So I was constantly looking for the magic wand. Through my own self-healing process, I take the hand of another gently and say, you see this room over here? This very dark room that you're terrified to enter? If I hold your hand for a moment, would you be willing at least to open the door and take a look inside?
Mm.
And it's never as bad as we think it is. And then when it is as bad as we think it is, it doesn't last as long as we think it's going to last either.
One of the issues is individuals believe that they are going to either cry so many tears that they'll die, or they'll be so
Hmm.
horrified to see the face of their many masks that they will just be obliterated. And the second thing is, I think right now, particularly with those that are in healing, light work, raising the energy of individuals or the consciousness of individuals, there is another spiral of the need to go there, because otherwise the work that we do with people has a bit of residual pain in it that gets passed along. At least that's my perception of it. Can you speak to those two things, the fear of the tears and the horror, and then what we as healers, light workers, personal growth advocates must do at this time around this shadow work?
Well, there's a couple of things here. We can either trip over chasing the light and be constantly chasing the light. And I often personally get uncomfortable when I'm around light chasers, because often light chasers do not allow other people to have their heavier or their darker or their sadder feelings. They try to talk other people out of them. Oh, well, you shouldn't be feeling like that because, or look on the bright side, etc. Then there's another group of people who get stuck in their woundedness. And it's a little bit like a hamster on a wheel, going round and round and round, the same thing, the same thing, the same thing. And so within my work, which is mostly family constellation work, there are people that enter the work attempting to change their family so that they can feel better, as
Mm.
opposed to changing themselves. And so one of the things that I've learned, and one of the things that I had to tell myself, is to give up all hope of ever having the happy childhood that we wanted. Sometimes the gift of life is all that we get. And really, that can be sufficient. Mhm. Most of us get a little bit more than the gift of life, or a lot more than the gift of life, but we all fell short of something. The buffet was not completely complete with hardly any of us, because we have wounded parents raising children. When wounded parents raise children, they pass on those wounds. So whatever demons we don't face in our past, it is those demons that are going to raise our children. And so that's what happened to us. We were often raised by the demons of our parents. And so it's about giving up all hope that we'll ever have the happy childhood that we had hoped for. But we can have happiness right now, not by pretending, but by being authentic. And so the path to healing is paved in authenticity at every step of the way, of every step of the way.
That means that all of us, regardless of the childhood that we had or the
Mhm.
childhood that we want to perceive that we have had, we
Mhm.
all carry this place within us that requires us to eventually find peace with our parents.
Absolutely. Bowing to the parents with peace for the gift of life is key to healing. You can do, or we can do as much healing as we want. We can say as many mantras as we want. We can say as many positive affirmations as we want. We can meditate as long as we want. But unless we're leading with kindness, it's not really delivering anything at all. And so part of that kindness is being able to stand back and say, well, I did get something. I got the gift of life, and it's up to me what to do with it. Fate is what was given to us, and destiny is what we do with it. And
Mm.
so the destiny part is the choice. That is the choice. Admittedly, some people have a more difficult fate than others. I acknowledge that and I recognize that. And I never seek to compare my own childhood with somebody else's childhood because the same events can affect somebody else differently. So we're not all the same and we're not made up of the same stuff. And so we're not all equal in that way. And so your mother, for example, abandoning you could have a completely different impact on you than, for example, my mother abandoning me, because we're not the same human being. So we're all unique and different. It's about recognizing that each of us is wounded, each of us is broken in one way or another, and bow not only to our own fate, but also with deep respect to the fate of others, knowing that we don't necessarily know better, we're not necessarily able to do better, but we're able to bow with kindness to what the other is able to achieve given their circumstances and limitations.
Now, Shavasti, that feels like a really easy place for individuals to bypass, to very quickly say, okay, I can just very quickly find the forgiveness and the peace with my parents, or my childhood wasn't that bad, or
Mm-hmm.
this is not a lifelong thing that I need to work with. I've already dealt with that. Why would I need to
Mm-hmm.
revisit that again?
Mm-hmm.
But yet, it seems to me, at least from my own experience of my inner work, I find that I revisit that again and again and again, and I find deeper layers of it to unearth compassion, kindness,
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love, not only for them, but then that returns back to myself.
I noticed that you use the word forgiveness, and I want to say something about that. Is it really our place to forgive somebody else? Is it really our place to forgive our mother or to forgive our father? Because we have to be very careful that we're not coming from this place of spiritual or healing superiority. I'm the better one, I'm the good one, I'm the one who understands, and therefore I am going to gift you with the gift of forgiveness. For me, forgiveness takes place when I move into this place of the complete and total acceptance of my fate with you, and I bow to that. I work with the pain, and it is my pain. It might be a pain that you caused me, but it's still the pain that is gestating within me. And so that is my pain. The first step to healing is absolutely accepting that it happened. Not something else happened, but this thing happened. This thing actually happened to me. We can be screaming all that we want. It's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And in many circumstances, it is not fair. But that doesn't change the fact that it actually happened. Forgiveness takes place, it goes hand in hand with acceptance. Acceptance of the other and acceptance that this actually happened to me. This actually happened to me. If we come from a place of saying, this should never have happened to me, then it's very, very difficult to move through that.
Forgiveness for me was not really about forgiving them, but
Mm-hmm.
coming to that place of realizing first this happened, so it must have been meant to happen. But second, I'm here to forgive my perception of what happened and then
Mm-hmm.
how I use that to rewound myself, to hurt
Mm-hmm.
myself again and
Mm-hmm.
again and again.
Absolutely. And that's all part of coming to peace with what we received. I'm very alerted when a client turns up at a workshop or turns up in my private practice and they start with, "Oh, I've forgiven my parents." And normally within a couple of minutes of inquiry, that turns out not to be the case. That there's a defense posture there of, well, I understand my mother better than she understands herself. I understand my father better than he understands himself. Can you hear the superiority in that?
Yes, definitely.
And so then we then become this spiritualized child who then gives a benediction to the parents, stands above the parents, stands in superiority with the parents. That's not always the case when somebody uses the word or says, "I've forgiven," but I'm just very alert to the fact that that is quite often the case. And that becomes another layer of defense around not wanting to feel what actually happened. I worked with somebody quite recently, and it's all they wanted was to understand why their father did something. And I said to them, "Well, what if there's no explanation whatsoever?
Hmm.
What if we never come to that understanding of why your father did that? Are you going to continue living in relationship to your wound and presenting your wound as the doorway through which you relate to the rest of the world? Is that what you want going forward?" See, some people believe that if only they understand something, then magically the wound goes away. And that is not the case. Absolutely not the case in my experience.
And you said a key word right there, which I think oftentimes individuals miss, and it is that need to understand. It is that staying in the head
Hmm.
rather than dropping into the heart. And
Hmm.
that's really the basis for where a lot of the suffering comes from. Talk
Hmm.
about how people allow themselves to just continue to suffer
Hmm.
when there is another door that they can enter.
And there are certain things that happen that are really difficult to understand. And we can waste many years trying to understand it. It might sound rather passive to shrug our shoulders at something, but it's very useful to actually say, "I don't know why my father did that. I have no idea why he acted in that way. But he did, and the result is I was hurt in this way or that way. Let me deal with the underlying wound." Because understanding is really not going to relieve me whatsoever. Because I guarantee you, when I have a client who simply wants to understand something, when I explain it to them, the next question is hot on the tail of that. And so no explanation will resolve that wound. And so it becomes this impulse to feed off explanations. Do you understand what I mean by that, Simran?
Yes.
When a client starts with, "If only I could understand why my mother did so, or why my brother did so, or why my sister did so, or why my father did so, if only I could understand that, then I could come to peace with it." You give them the explanation, perhaps there's one there to give, and they say, "Well, what about this? Well, what about that? What about the other?" So it's never satisfies. That question is never really answered. It never satisfies. We get onto that merry-go-round of, "If only I could understand, if only I could understand, if only I could understand, if only I could understand," because it avoids dealing with what actually happened and the reality of that. And it stops us from accepting the fact of what actually happened. So it gets in the way.
My experience of the decade where I chose to be as much of a disciple to the darkness as I had been to the light could probably be looked at as an experience of choosing suffering.
Right.
And it was not necessarily that I wanted to understand, but there was a part of me that wanted to have a knowing, a multidimensional knowing and deepening into myself of, if I created this in my life,
Mm-hmm.
what part of me, where in my inside myself
Mm-hmm.
do those beliefs, those energies, those emotions reside that would bring me to this brink of pain and
Mm-hmm.
obliteration that I
Mm-hmm.
experienced. And so
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was a bit of a scientist and an explorer because I learn through experience. And I think that my soul and my humanness really came to experience all of the vast humanity that we are, from one polarity all the way to the other.
You're walking the path of the wounded healer. That's very clear.
When I came to the end of that period, and what I share in my latest trilogy is that if we simply embrace the life we've been given, that is how one person changes the world, because we transmute everything inside ourselves and we come to this place of seeing the world from neutrality, from love, from more compassion. People, whether it is our society or culture or the Western world, we have learned to follow the dangling carrot and look for the horizon in the distance rather than standing in our shoes and understanding everything we're seeking actually resides in the moment that we're in. Shavasti, also known as the author John L. Payne, is the author of 2 widely respected books on the topic of family constellations, The Language of the Soul and The Healing of Individuals, Families, and Nations. He is also the author of Teachings from an Awakened Heart and audiobook of teachings under the same name. If you'd like to find out more about the upcoming events, go to his website, shavasti.com, or if you'd like to host him and have an event in your area, contact him through his website. Click the link in the bio description below. In my new trilogy, I hope that you will pick it up. It is titled Living the 7 Blessings of Human Experience, which goes into your personality, identity, and the part of you that you think is conscious but is actually walking unconscious in the world. The second book is Being, the 7 illusions that derail personal power, purpose, and peace. The illusions that we have gotten caught up in, like time, money, hierarchy, war, even identity. The third book is Knowing, the 7 human expressions of grace, ways that you can rise into giving yourself the graces that are required to open up to higher and higher grace. I invite you to pick that up and open it as oracles while you read any other books. We'll be right back after these messages.
Simran is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
Click the link in the bio description below. The 1111 Collective on Substack. Become an annual subscriber or a Master Founder member and start to also receive 1111 Magazine on audio. It is an honor and a privilege to have you there. The quest for truth is inconvenient. Most of us at one point in our lives, or almost always in some areas of our lives, limit the truth we speak with the notion that somehow we can control others or control relationships. We don't speak our needs clearly, sometimes dropping hints, sometimes through never fully completing a sentence, while leaving it up to the other person to fill in the gaps and anticipate our needs. Truth is always simple. The statements are always simple. If we need to use a lot of words to explain our truth, then we can know that we're stuck in our own story about it, or bound by an opinion or a belief. Shavasti, also known as John L. Payne, certainly does speak the truth. You can go to Shavasti.com to find out more. Shavasti, can you speak a little bit how we shift our world from this place of constantly running ahead of the tide to letting the ocean meet us?
All of our society, all of our culture, and it does differ from country to country and culture to culture, of course. But there's an underlying theme that's very, very present, which is around the avoidance of feelings. Feelings have been given a bad reputation. Certainly if we live in a very developed country, so I'm in the United Kingdom, you're in the United States, we can avoid our feelings extremely easily. There's always something to buy. There's always some food to eat. There's always some cigarette to be had. There's always some alcohol to be drunk. There's always some sugar to be consumed. There's always something that can take us away from feeling exactly what we're feeling. A lot of that comes from being discouraged to feel feelings when we were very, very young. We were often made to be quiet. We were told, please don't cry, please don't cry, please don't cry, please don't cry. So this message has been received over and over and over again, that somehow feelings are a weakness, and so we avoid them. That's number one. Number two, when you talk about the horizon, remember that is very much embedded within our Christian religious upbringing. And whether we're Christian or Muslim or from some other religion as well, there's always, well, there's a better place than this, there's a better place than this, there's a better place than this. All the suffering that you do now, here and now, is because there's a better place that's waiting for you. So it's built into our culture, it's built into the way that we think. So I suffer today because there's a better place that's coming. And I've noticed that with spiritual people, a lot of people on the healing path in the healing fields and meditation, etc., are doing exactly the same thing. They're looking towards a better world. It's one thing to have this vision of a better world. I very much do hold a vision of a better world. I'm a very big fan of Star Trek. And so where there's a lot of inclusion, diversity, opportunity, equality, etc. And I very much believe in the ideals of that. So there's that on the one hand, but there is this idea that there is some other place that is better. So we're never here now. We've got one foot looking for heaven, looking for paradise. So, for example, my house is surrounded by 9 trees, and I bless and I thank those trees nearly every single day. So I have a little piece of paradise myself right here in the center of London. And it's about being okay with what I'm feeling, because not every day is going to be a good day. And it's accepting the good days, embracing the good days as much as I embrace the bad days and what's present in those bad days.
So you were talking about that drive and hunger that persists mostly in the Western world. And when I look at the places that we must go, it's almost paradoxical
Mhm.
because we need to do the healing. We need to face the heartbreak and face the world the way it is by bowing to our fate. And yet
Mhm.
at the same time, we need to shift from being that mystic to being that visionary of seeing a world that doesn't need to be fixed, that doesn't need
Right.
us to save it. And so how do we walk the middle line of that path by giving ourselves our humanity, which I would say is that part that needs to feel, also sipping from the chalice of our divinity?
I don't pretend to know why any of us are here. It's a great mystery. I used to think that I knew why we were here, but I don't pretend to know why we were here. However, I've come to the conclusion that if there is a purpose for us being here, it's about learning compassion, empathy, and the art of kindness. Compassion, empathy, and the art of kindness. I've often spoken about kindness being the religion that I practice. So rather than some kind of dogma or imposing beliefs on other people, I find that the older that I'm getting and the longer that I'm on this path, the fewer opinions that I have, because everybody has an opinion. They can differ wildly. What I absolutely know to be true is that when hearts connect, healing takes place. What I absolutely know to be true is that when I'm authentic and vulnerable, I have an opportunity not only to show my heart to another, but to have another show their heart to me, and therefore connection takes place. We have an epidemic or a pandemic of loneliness in the Western world. We have a pandemic of loneliness here in the United Kingdom, and I know for sure that it exists in the United States as well. When we are called back to authenticity, when we're told it's okay to be wounded, it's okay to be broken, it doesn't make you a misfit, doesn't determine that you no longer belong, that it's okay to be broken. And once we can walk the earth with our wound as our companion, and as our wound as our companion gently informs us to be patient and kind and compassionate with others, the antidote to loneliness is there because there is connection. And that's what I'm always looking for deeper connection. And so my healing work is about guiding people through this place of discovering the value of their heart. Many of us have discovered a love mask, what we think it's supposed to look like, but it really takes courage to discover the value of the heart, because the heart can bear it all. The heart can be broken over and over and over and over again, and inside it is a precious diamond. But we can only find that if we are willing to be raw, to be authentic, and to ditch most, if not all, of our belief systems.
I want to go back to the words opinion and also place the word judgment there, because that feels like how we try to control, and also how we are able to build the defenses against our heart. And when we do so, we end up building the defenses against others. The control that exists right now, is that a safety mechanism that we've been taught, that has been passed through our genes and our DNA? What purpose does that control serve, and what do we do with it when we think about the balancing of masculine and feminine?
So let's talk about control. Control is about keeping the heart defended. I can control you to make sure I get some of what I want. But again, it's a bit like, if only I understood why my father did this, then I would be healed. And so when we control other people, we don't actually get what we want. It doesn't touch the place that needs to be touched. And so giving up control would be saying something like, please just hold me. There's a lot of vulnerability in that statement. Please just hold me. So I know that when I give a workshop, and I know that when I meet clients in person for a one-on-one intensive, somebody online, that each person carries within them that often unspoken sentence of please just hold me. And it's my job to help them feel safe enough where they can even begin to feel that that is an unspoken need that they have, let alone speak the sentence. Sometimes they actually do speak the sentence, please just hold me. But it's about recognizing that all of us have this deep need to be held, to be seen, to be respected, and to be heard. And so when we have an honest relationship with that aspect of ourselves, that we need to be heard and held and seen and respected and loved, and being loved is all of those other things that I've just named, it really changes who we are and how we walk through the world. I don't have much to say about the balance between masculine and feminine energies, because my definition of that might be quite different, very much in touch with my own femininity.
That's really more of where I'm leaning into, Shavasti, is the internal balance of masculine and feminine as opposed to male, female, or external.
Well, it gets defined in many, many different ways. And I think sometimes people associate femininity with passivity, and I don't see it that way at all. The masculine can be very nurturing as well. And so very often nurturing is seen as being a feminine quality, but the masculine can also be very nurturing, but it's a different type of nurturing. So for me, that there's room and place for both.
When you perceive current spirituality, what do you see as the hindrances to the heart? What would you perceive as the areas that must shift in our approach to current spirituality?
The big hindrance is I'm special. That's the big hindrance. I am special. I'm spiritual. I know better. I understand more. And I've lived in different places in the world, and I've lived in one place in which there was a big spiritual community. And they would announce proudly, I only hang out with conscious people. What on earth does that mean? I only hang out with conscious people. Where's the kindness in that statement? There's a lot of exclusion in that statement. And so there's a lot of I am special in spiritual and healing communities where we then become separate. Of course, I don't want to be around brutish people and unkind people. That's an unpleasant experience. But to divide the world into spiritual and not spiritual kind of goes against what spirituality is all about, as far as I'm concerned. To make statements like, I only hang around with conscious people, also goes against what spirituality is all about, as far as I'm concerned. To me, spirituality is about the engendering, about the growth, about the expansion of compassion and kindness and caring. And so I'm special is the biggest hindrance to spirituality. I see a lot of people holding on to their identity of themselves as somehow being special and different, not ordinary. You see, when we accept ourselves as ordinary, similar movement to accepting our fate as it is, when we accept ourselves as ordinary, we can allow ourselves as an ordinary person to love in an ordinary way, and then that becomes extraordinary. That's what I have to say about that.
And kind of in the same lane as that, One thing that came from sitting still and really witnessing myself and the world, we are far more unconscious than we are conscious.
Oh gosh, yes.
But admitting
Abs-
that is something that I don't know everyone wants to do.
I totally accept that there are parts of me that are asleep, and I'm constantly surprised. And I totally expect to be surprised a lot. Sometimes when I attend a colleague's workshop or their lecture, and I've been in this work, family constellation work, for 25 years now, and I've been working with other people for 30 years. And sometimes my mouth drops to the floor because they've said something that I have never considered before. And there's a little gem of truth. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I missed that. I never saw that. I'm totally aware that there are lots of parts of me that are asleep, or perhaps that don't even want to know. How's that for a kicker?
That's
Coming to
right.
terms with a part of us that doesn't even want to know. And so I accept that that's there. I've learned over the years not to be shocked or surprised when something appears out of nowhere. I just say, okay, there's something else to sink my teeth into and to look at with honesty and authenticity, etc. Yeah,
That is also part of being undefended. To be innocent, to be curious.
absolutely. And being undefended is being really open when somebody comes to you and says, hey, can we sit down for a couple of minutes? There's something about your behavior or there's something about what you said that's made me feel uncomfortable. To be really, really curious, to listen with eyes wide open, as opposed to feeling defended. Oh God, what are they going to say? Well, no, it can't possibly be me. I'm a spiritual teacher. I wouldn't ever do anything offensive. The fact of the matter is, there are times, no matter how well-meaning we are actually a toxic influence on somebody else, as opposed to a healing influence on somebody else. And we have to come to terms with that shadow aspect of ourselves. We all make mistakes, and therefore having an undefended heart is being willing to listen, and whilst at the same time look at who's actually telling you that. It's different when we're dealing with someone's projection, but still we can receive it with grace as opposed to being defended, to really sitting at, okay, I value and respect this individual and there is merit to what they're saying. Therefore, I am going to listen and investigate. And if necessary, take it into a session with somebody else. That's part of being undefended.
In going back to one of the passages that I read from your work on your website that spoke about truth and you saying that it's always simple, I find that truth also has brevity in it. What is it that keeps people talking without ceasing?
The avoidance of feeling their pain. If they keep on talking, they don't have to feel the emptiness. So they fill it with words. I teach something that's called the language of the soul. So in family constellation work, we use what's called healing sentences. And that's actually a training that I do to work with people, often with seasoned therapists, to teach them this way of communicating and really stating very simple sentences that bring us to truth. So look at what I said earlier. Please just hold me.
Mm.
So somebody could speak volumes just to try and express that. But saying it simply and directly really takes us to that vulnerable spot.
And it opens both people.
It opens both people, yes. Another healing sentence could be something like, I take you as my mother. Well, what does that mean? I take you as my mother. Well, what it means is my fate to be your child and everything that led to you becoming my parent, I no longer argue with. You are indeed my mother and I am your child. And I no longer argue with this fact. And I
Mm.
bow to my fate as your child in the world. I take you as my mother. It's a very simple statement, but it's a very profoundly deep statement. And it can bring up a lot of resistance to actually say it. But once I explain the deeper meaning behind it and everything that it entails, then people begin to understand, well, what does that actually mean? And so back to your initial point, when people talk a lot, if I fill myself with words and lots 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 of words, I don't have to feel the devastation of my emptiness and my loneliness because I wasn't received in full love by my parents because my parents were damaged and they were wounded. This transgenerational wound that's been handed down for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations has interrupted the flow of love through the generations. And therefore, instead of receiving this entire love pie, I got a little slither. I didn't get enough. I didn't get enough. And so therefore, I'm going to fill my not enoughness with words and words and words and words and words and words. And if all the words don't work, then I'm going to fill myself with alcohol, with cigarettes, with sugar, etc. You see how that works?
I do. And when we look at that wounding of parents, the mother role plays a huge role in all of that. I mean, we all come from the mother, whether we're male or female. Ultimately, the mother,
Absolutely.
is
Hmm.
that the very deepest place of the wound?
Not always, but often that's where it starts. And so, for example, my own mother was abandoned by her mother when she was 9 years old. And so that impacted her ability to truly bond with the children that she had, and I'm one of them. But to give you a prime example of that we often see in family constellation work, is that when a child is lost, for example, where the mother's first child died either in childbirth or shortly after birth, then the mother's eyes are often on the dead child. And so they become blind to the living children that then follow. And so that is then felt by the living children. My mother's not actually looking at me. They don't actually understand where the mother is looking, although I can see it when I work with somebody. Part of the movement is to mend that gaze, so to speak, to look at, okay, accepting that you were born to a grief-stricken mother. That can be part of the healing process.
On your website, you have a really rich and poignant piece around the betrayal of women.
Because we live in a patriarchal society where women only had position in society as was afforded them by men, either by their father or by their husbands. They earned their position or were given their position through the structure of the patriarchal society. And if we look at the structure of religion, there's no place for women there at all within the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's solidly patriarchal because we've been in a patriarchal society for so many generations that women will jockey and vie for position within that structure and are willing to tread on each other in order to get there. It's as simple as that. And normally, the first person to call a woman a slut is another woman, not a
Mm,
man.
that's
Yeah,
true. Hmm.
yeah.
We began the show talking about until I'm at peace with my parents, then the healing can't really happen. As we close out the show, I'd love to have your take on what does peace mean?
I no longer fight against, I no longer resist. I no longer resist what is. So, for example, when I meet somebody who's constantly raging against the world, and you've probably met people who are constantly raging against the world, it's politics this, politics that,
Hmm.
and there are lots of things to be upset about in our current time. That's a given. But we know these people that live in that constant place of annoyance, anger, raging about something. I always know for absolutely for certain that they are not at peace with one or both of their parents. Because my experience tells me that when we come to peace with our parents, we are by and large at peace with the world as it is. That doesn't mean that we ignore things. That doesn't mean that we pretend that everything is okay, because it certainly is far from okay at the moment. But to be completely obsessed with how the world is 24/7, that tends to go away. We just accept, okay, unfortunate as it is, but war is part of life. Discord is part of life. And so we accept the existence of it. That doesn't mean to say that we don't join political movements to change stuff. It doesn't mean that we don't demonstrate and use our freedom of speech to say what we want to say. It doesn't mean any of that. So I'm not talking about passivity, but I'm really talking about coming to peace with things as they are, which is a different place to come from. And so for me, the deeper movement of coming to peace with our parents is also about the total and complete acceptance of our fate as it is, that I am in this body. I was born to this nation. I am this ethnicity. I am this gender. This is my sexual orientation. This is the color of my hair. This is the color of my eyes. I am in a place of acceptance of this because I bow to you, Mother and Father, for the precious gift of life.
Will you embrace the gift of life through bowing to your fate? And by doing so, will you allow your destiny to unfold? Shavasti writes, the power of the feminine lies in its ability to nurture. It lies in its ability to express love as flow and movement. The feminine, by its very nature, surrenders, and it is in that surrendering that love can be realized. When it comes to any form or expression of spirituality, it is this very ability to surrender to the flow of love that leads to grace and to a more direct experience of the divine, or a more direct experience of the heart. I invite you to find out more about Shavasti, John L. Payne. If you are interested in his family constellation work, go to his website, look up where some of the workshops and the trainings are taking place. He is a beautiful teacher, a mystic in his own right, a visionary, an individual that will take you by the hand and introduce you to your heart. His work today is inclusive of family constellation work and represents a synthesis of almost 30 years working with individuals and groups, over 8,000 private family constellation, shamanic, and energy healing sessions, plus more than 500 workshops worldwide and 5 published books. Shavasti.com. That link is in the bio description below. Thank you again, Shavasti, for coming on 1111, for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and so many beautiful truths.
Thank you, Simran. Thank you for inviting me. Most generous and kind.
Do join my Substack. My publication is Beyond the Illusion, and you can find it at iamsimran1111.substack.com. That link is in the bio description. You'll actually receive all of the 1111 magazine issues on audio as part of that, in addition to the weekly prompt, inquiry, contemplation, and meditation that I provide to all of the subscribers on the annual membership. Thank you so much for spending time. Until next week, in love, of love, with love and as love, be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living. You are not on the journey. You are the journey.